I'm speaking with Kevin Simmons and Daniel Sutter, author of the new AMS book, Economic and Societal Impacts of Tornadoes. And I just have a few questions for them. First, I'm just interested in how this project all got started. You are both economists, and I'm interested in how you got interested in tornadoes, basically.
Well, we actually got started, I think, in the aftermath of the May 3rd, 1999 tornado outbreak in Oklahoma. We were both working or teaching at the universities in the Oklahoma City area then, and I know that that event had a strong impact on me. And we actually collaborated first trying to look at tornado shelters and trying to look and put a value on tornado shelters and try to estimate is it a worthwhile investment. I know I personally wanted to try to answer the question of whether I should get one in my house in Oklahoma. And so as economists we knew we could address that question if we could get the right data.
Right.
And we started doing that, and then we presented some of our research to a group of meteorologists at OU working in the National Severe Storms Laboratory, and it's just sort of taken off from there, and we kept looking at one question after another.
And this has been a 10-year or so project for you?
It has. That was in 1999.
Okay.
And at first we thought it was going to be a fairly short-term project where we'd look at a couple of questions, but then as it evolved, it just seemed like we would get one project done, and that actually opened up avenues to look at another issue that may have come off of that. And we were constantly getting some encouragement, particularly from the Severe Storms Lab, to continue our work, and they were generous enough to fund some of the work. And along the way we met some folks in the insurance industry that funded some of our work. There's an insurance institute up in Canada that gave us a little bit of funding to do some work, and then there's an institute in Florida, IBHS, that's also interested in our work. So things just began to build, and finally we got to the point where we realized that we had put together enough material that it seemed logical to talk about doing a book on the topic, which we started about 2 years ago.
Okay. Well, without giving away all the juicy parts of it, I mean, were there any results that you can talk about that were particularly surprising, unusual, interesting in any way?
Well, we've done some, I think, interesting work on looking at the effect of warnings and false alarms on tornado casualties. Was one thing that was really sort of innovative is we were able to look at the effect of false alarms on tornado casualties, and that's sort of nice because relative to other research on hazard warnings, have been looking more along the lines of like hurricanes and evacuation, with the hurricane warnings, and so we were able to apply this to tornadoes with a very large data set of all the local warning histories and investigate to find that. Contrary to the research on hurricane evacuations, it looked like false alarms did matter, that there is a cry wolf effect, that when the local false alarm ratio is higher, then there are more casualties in tornadoes in the area. So,
right.
And so there is a trade-off. If there wasn't a trade-off, then what we could do is just you could advise the Weather Service to just try to warn for every tornado to increase the probability of detection, and that would reduce casualties, but there's a trade-off. When they try and do that, they're going to increase the false alarm ratio, and so they have to be careful. They have to try and balance that out, and so I think that's one of the important results, contributions. We also found a very strong effect of Doppler Radar when the Weather Service in the 1990s, part of their modernization, installed Doppler Radar. That led to about a 40% reduction in fatalities and injuries, and we were able to document that by looking at the exact date at which the radar was installed in each of the different Weather Service offices across the country. And it turns out to be a very strong effect, and a part of that effect is due to improvements in warnings afterwards.
Right.
The probability of detection went from about 0.35 to 0.6, so a pretty substantial jump right after. It's continued to rise after that. And there was a slight reduction in the false alarm ratio, but some of it also seems to be due to better response to warnings, that even controlling for issuing more warnings or fewer false alarms. There seems to be some extra effect of Doppler radar that doesn't get accounted for in that fashion. And I think that's probably the public's being able to view the Doppler radar images on television and being more willing to respond to a warning issued, given that they know that forecasters are issuing that based on these better Doppler radar images.
And you mentioned hurricanes. Can your methodology be applied to other environmental situations, disasters, and things like that?
Well, certainly. In fact, let me give you an example. One of the things we did in the book that you can see is that we looked at the value of tornado shelters, for instance.
Okay.
Now, one way you can look at the value of tornado shelters is from the perspective of a public policy maker, which is we're going to put X number of dollars in and we hope to save, a certain number of lives, but what the policymaker has to realize is that there's a trade-off, because that money could have been put into something else that may actually save more lives. In fact, we found that from a public point of view, providing subsidies to individuals to put in a tornado shelter may not be such a good use of public dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Now, having said that, you can also look at the question of the value of a shelter a different way. You can look at it from the perspective of what does it do to the value of the home if the homeowner puts a tornado shelter in. And we found that it did, in fact, in the Oklahoma City metro area, increase the value, the resale value of a home, much as if you updated your kitchen and something like that.
Right.
Now, we've done the same, or I've done the same type of work. Dan and I have done work individually in addition to working together. But you can take that same methodology and look at the same kind of mitigation for something like hurricanes. And I've done studies in the past where we looked at hurricane mitigation that is on a home, say hurricane shutters that protect the windows and doors,
mm-hmm.
and get similar kind of results. So the types of methodologies that we use for tornadoes can certainly be used in other disasters, including the casualty models that Dan alluded to. I mean, we could use the same kind of casualty models and talk about that, as well as damage functions. It's not just people getting hurt and killed in a tornado. You're also doing damage to homes, and so if you can get the data in terms of what kinds of damage were done, you can run what we call a damage function and look at that. But the same thing occurs whether you're talking about a hurricane or a landslide or any type of natural hazard.
Right. Who are you aiming this book at? Who do you hope would buy this book and would be helped most by it?
I think it could be of interest to I think meteorologists
mm-hmm.
could find it of interest because we address the economic and societal impacts of both the tornado events
right.
and then also the value of weather of the watches and warnings
right.
For tornadoes. And we also talk about some ways about if we study the impacts of tornadoes, that can give us clues as to what types of information could help us reduce those impacts in the future. And so we offer a few suggestions in terms of directions maybe for future research
mm-hmm.
and by meteorologists that sort of saying that if you could do this for us, this would be of great value. And also showing some ways where at least the data to date isn't really showing that there's a lot of necessarily a lot of value maybe in pursuing other directions of research. So I think it helps show sort of the back and forth iterative process that if you study societal impacts, you can use that to inform the future research. And then of course the research allows us to generate products that we can show reduce societal impacts. I mean, I think some economists would be interested in the book as well. I mean, it applies. I mean, tornadoes sort of provide from an economist standpoint, like a case study that would be of interest to us. And so, economists would probably think of it as a case study of things like, how do people perceive some low probability risks, and do they find or hazard warnings credible, and things of that nature. And then I think people interested in tornadoes or weather generally would find the book of interest. And it's going to be a little different to a book. It's not going to
right.
talk about anything about how tornadoes form or that kind of stuff, because we don't know that much. Because we're economists, not meteorologists, so you're not going to learn a lot about the formation of tornadoes. But I mean, if I talk about societal impacts, I think it's interesting because if we want to eventually reduce impacts of tornadoes or other types of extreme weather, the first we have to do is understand how they're caused. It's sort of like a doctor can't hope to cure a patient until they diagnose the illness and the ailment, and you really have to know exactly how it is that, say, people get killed in tornadoes if we want to try to come up with policies or research that could address those vulnerabilities.
Well, great. Thanks very much for talking to us, and good luck with the book.
Thank you.